we'll be like, look, Jace, we can do it too. So, and then maybe we'll stick it on his YouTube just for fun. So, um, so yeah. So yeah. Any initial
And
thoughts on
then
Sermon on the Mount? So, if you don't know it, yeah, does anybody here not know Sermon on the Mount generally? Okay, all right. Yeah, this is the big one, right? It's the one of the many big sermons or big what are they called? The in Matthew, the speeches of Matthew. There's a fancy word for it that I'm not remembering right now. Um, but you got the Sermon on the Mount, you got the Sermon on the Plain, you got all sorts of different ones. Yeah. The so it's the principal teaching of Jesus as relayed through the Gospels. And there's a lot of stuff packed into it. It's pretty amazing. So um, I know Jace did a series on it. I think I saw a little bit where he just went through like a verse at a time, and like there's just so much dripped into it if you take the time and really go through it. I'm not going nearly that slow with what I've been doing, and then today will be a high level thing because we're going to try and cram as much as you guys want to cram in. So um, the biggest thing that jumped out to me when I was doing it was actually the beginning and the Beatitudes. So I don't know if y'all got your Bibles in front of you or not, but anybody want to read the Beatitudes? If you do, or I can read it. I've got it here in front of me. That'd be Matthew 5. You can start in 1 if you want, or it picks up in 3 and then goes to 12.
I can read it.
Oh,
Now, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. He said, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for there is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, they will be filled. Blessed the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for there is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you.
thank you, Kim. So yeah, the big thing that I like, there's so much each one of these you could unpack, but the big thing like that we see in all of them is this blessed. And when you really unpack the word and dive into the Greek and the Hebrew, so we see blessed and we think like God bless, or bless this, bless that. Um, that is actually not the word that is here. That word is typically Baruch, like when God blesses. Um, this is more of Jesus. This is the word Ashrei in Hebrew. And it's written in Greek, but the Septuagint with the translation gives us the seal to which one it's pointing at. And so Ashrei would be better, like fortunate are those, would be a pretty literal instead of like blessed. Fortunate are the poor in spirit. Fortunate are those who mourn. It's more of a observational thing of standing, not so much I'm calling down a blessing upon. Um, and then what's really fun is when you think about it that way, is it's like you're like, well, this is all sorts of messed up. Like the, you know, um, as far as fortunate are the poor in spirit. Well, no, no, they're not. Fortunate are those who mourn. No, no, they're not. Fortunate are the no, like it's all backwards, right? So, like if you're in the crowd and this is how Jesus opens the whole thing, you're like, what is going on? Um, um, Another one that I saw, I think Tim Mackey used this when he did a not quite as literal translation, but another way to think about it is like the good life belongs to, like fortunate are those, would be like, so the good life belongs to the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The good life belongs to those who mourn, for they will be comforted. The good life is for the meek, for they will inherit the earth. The good life is for those who are hungry and thirsty for righteousness, for they will be filled. The good life is for the merciful, for they will be shown mercy, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I just that was the most impactful part to me is like really getting behind the word blessed. I don't know if any of you guys had ever got into that in your studies, the Sermon on the Mount, or not, or what your thoughts are on that if it's the first time hearing it. But,
Well, he turned everything upside down. And so this is a different statement from what they had been used to, or we ourselves.
Yeah.
In Luke, in his teachings in Luke especially, he turned everything upside down.
Yeah.
And so instead of saying those who are they're sad, they mourn because, but blessed are those who mourn. Those who mourn are in bad shape. No, blessed are those who mourn.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we hear how many people have heard like the upside down kingdom. Oops, sorry, that's my alarm. So yeah, I mean, it's the kind of like that. This is the intro to the upside down kingdom. Like, wait a minute, this doesn't look like what I like. If this is what we're signing up for, wait, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's people that fit all these categories in the crowd that day, right? And even starting out in the beginning, like they're going to be used to like this rabbinic way of doing things. If they're looking, he's trying to make himself sound like one of the other teachers, or that's how this is recorded.
Could it be that
So
he's encouraging them in that they have good things about their life that's not necessarily the worldly way of looking at things?
yeah, I think that's a big part of it, where it's like even though um you may think this is a bad spot, it's not necessarily a bad spot because, and that's where we see some of the dualities. But some of them, like if we're not careful, we got to make sure not to put our lens on them in the context. But like if you look at the poor in spirit, a good modern day translation for that would probably be the powerless. So people without power, or minorities, I guess. You know, the people on the fringes, right?
Marginal.
In Jesus's time, poverty was both, I mean, widespread economic, but also spiritual. So it's got both components. Like Rome had taken over, you know, everything in Israel was measured and maximized to serve the empire, not the Israelites. And there were a few people at the top that were conspiring that did okay to maybe well. Everybody else didn't. Um, and then the priesthood wasn't taking polls on spiritual decisions with crowds in Galilee. Um, and there was a lot of the confrontation that we're going to see with the Pharisees that gets worked into this sermon quite a bit as well. Um, so yeah, like this, and this phrase that we see for poor in spirit, the word that's translated spirit is that word pneuma in Greek, or ruach in Hebrew,
Mhm.
which is breath, or it's the spirit that God breathed into us in Genesis. Same word there with ruach. And so I think what Jesus is trying to do is kind of playing with this idea of what we would do today with like broken-hearted or heavy-hearted or light-hearted, with this whole spirit combo. Like, you know, we've just changed the word, but the meaning is still the same. So when we think of poverty of spirit, we might think better of like powerless. So the kingdom of heaven belongs to the powerless. Which, I mean, I think we see played out in the church a lot, where people on the margins are more affected by the message, it seems like. It's easy to get it caught up in wealth and neglect what really matters. And we see that played out with the churches in Revelation. We see that played out in our country. We see it played out all over the world. Um, I mean, if we just look at the United States, our child poverty rate is nearly double the average of 25 other developed nations. And we're the richest country in the world. So, our church is trying to do a lot to help with that. But yeah, there's still poverty today. So, any other thoughts on poor spirit, Tom?
A cultural offshoot of this blessed term is in today's world. It's typical for a Hebrew speaker to say, "How are you doing?" which is either Mashlamek or Mashlama. And the religious Jew response to that is Baruch Hashem, blessed be the name. So they're giving it. It teaches them to be feel connected to God and blessed in spite of how things are going, and grateful for God's relationship with us. I worked on a Jewish program for 7 years, one of the early Iron Dome missiles. And so I had weekly contact with real Israelis and got to know them pretty well.
Something that just came into my mind as well about this whole, like, the connection between like the powerless, the poor in spirit, and theirs being the kingdom of heaven. I mean, that's kind of what we're called to do as well, right? Like, we're called to lay down our lives. We're called to become poor for the benefit of others to a certain extent, right? To serve, to lay it all out there. And so I wonder about thinking through it that way. Like, the way that you get the kingdom of heaven is by becoming powerless, not by seeking power.
See that?
No.
Especially in the eyes of what Jesus portrayed, washing the disciples' feet. He was a servant to those who, and he ultimately had all the power.
Okay. But then the next one, we go to the good life belongs to those who mourn, or fortunate are those who mourn, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. And again, we get like a double meaning here with the mourning, encompassing both like a personal grief, but also sorrow, I think, for the world's brokenness and like the brokenness that we see in the world, like a communal sorrow. In Isaiah 61, 2 and 3, it talks about comforting those who mourn in Zion. Revelation 21:4 gives us a future hope where God wipes away every tear. So we see people mourning. So mourning is a theme throughout. And Jesus is picking up on that as far as the good life belongs to those who mourn. Uh, and this part makes me think of if you're not mourning, are you even paying attention? No matter which side you're on, you got something to mourn over, right? Uh, people, there's a lot of good in the world, sure, and it's our role to make it more so. But we're not quite there yet. There's just all sorts of stuff that we can do to try and reach out and bring heaven to earth more now. Well, yeah. So, any thoughts anybody wants to share on mourning and being comforted?
The Israelis are pretty serious about mourning. They have a cultural thing that called sitting Shiva, which is they mourn for a deceased family member for 7 days and mostly stay in the home of the deceased and receive visitors.
I think are they the ones that they don't do the burial right away either? There's like a gap.
Actually, the burial is required to be within 3 days, unless there's a serious reason why not.
Gotcha.
So the sitting Shiva includes the burial, usually more like 2 days, and then the rest of the week dedicated to thinking of the deceased and sharing with the community of that they're in. They also tear the collars on their shirts, perfectly good shirts, to show the strength of the feeling.
Yeah.
And they have the meeting that they have in the in the home is requires a minyan, which is at least 10 male adults, which would be 12 and over, to constitute that legitimate group size to have the morning service. And they have to know where east is, which a lot of people. The one that I went to a couple of years ago, no one in the room knew where east was except me, because I knew what my property lines were from looking at the deed.
That's funny. Yeah. Then we move on to this next one that's a little bit funky with meekness. Belongs to the meek. Now, biblical meekness is almost always in a context of affliction throughout the Bible. And if affliction is a party word that you don't use, think hardship or suffering. Um, and biblical affliction includes humility and trust toward God, gentleness toward people, and patience, or maybe better understood as endurance, perseverance. Jesus is quoting this line near copy and paste from Psalm 37:11, which states, "The meek shall inherit the land and delight themselves in abundant peace." So here in Jesus's first teaching, he's foretelling of affliction. You know, you're invited in, the powerless. You're invited in. There's a hope, but hey, there's probably going to be some affliction, a need to persevere, and a promise that comes that if we do, that we'll inherit the earth, right? And this is probably a reference to the new earth that they would have been familiar with what they're thinking, when new heaven, new earth, Zion. We see this repeated and expounded on, not just here, but throughout the rest of the New Testament writers. The writer of Hebrews talks about, let us run the race with perseverance, fixing our eyes on Jesus. Yeah, I think the big thing is you shouldn't necessarily strive to be meek in a sense of like I need to be less than, but the humility part of it and the recognizing, again, like what we're invited into, I think is the important part. So I'm going through this real fast. I know. I think when Jace does these, he did a sermon one time, and it's like a whole. On each one of these. So feel free to jump in and share your guys' thoughts. Yeah, or interrupt.
My Bible says gentle rather than meek. And
Yeah.
I think the United States culture, at least, historically has made the mistake of translating that as more of a wimp person. It's really more of a strength in quietness.
Yeah. That makes me think of, I don't know if any of you have seen the movie, is it 42, the Jackie Robinson movie? I think it is, where the manager, I forget his name, for Jackie Robinson is talking to him about not fighting back against the racists in the stands. And he's like, you want somebody who's uh, not tough enough to stand up for themselves. And he's like, no, I want somebody who's tough enough to not stand up for himself. You got to take it. Oh, and not respond. Yeah. It's not weakness. That's for sure. Yeah. Well, I think too about like responding with this is something that I feel like I've shifted a lot in the last few years, even in my own personal life, where like I've gone from like a default setting of getting angry a lot of the time to like getting more sad, where you realize, um, you know, people act the way they do for reasons, and those reasons are usually legitimate and not good for them. So uh, I think it's a perspective too. And so, and it's like you said, a gentleness and a respect for where different people come from. And everybody needs love at the end of the day, right? And like that's our job. Yeah. Yeah. The good life, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice and righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. We might think, we got this one nailed down. Modern day Christians are all about claiming justice and righteousness, right? How often do we see or hear somebody on social media calling down God's justice on mankind? But I think that might actually be missing the point. Uh, especially when you put that justice in the context of the other values that are expressed here,
Right.
meekness, gentleness, God grieving for the world, longing to make it right, and his enduring mercy. Um, I love the like whole hunger and thirst thing. Um, that's the thing that speaks to me as a guy who can sometimes get hangry, pretty regularly sometimes, like around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Not so much of a hangry thing, but I might need my afternoon coffee to pick me up. It's like a switch gets flipped, so much so that like my staff knows don't bug Travis around 3 o'clock. Don't schedule client appointments at 3 o'clock. uh, but yeah, I wonder like how to cultivate having a switch that's flipped towards justice. That's like that, right? Or in God's justice. Um, and I've got a switch for justice or what I think is justice. I mean, that's why I became a lawyer. That's why I love fighting to right wrongs and make people whole. Um, that God's justice is so much more than that, so much deeper than that. And yeah, so I mean,
But do you think that this is a here and now, or is this a after the kingdom?
I think it's both. I think it's both. I mean, I think we'll see throughout the Sermon on the Mount that a lot of these are things that are calls to do now. But then like we just saw a little bit ago, inheriting the earth and other things like that. I mean, there's definitely a future hope aspect as well. And it's, the upside down kingdom, it's here, but not fully, right? That's the
Right.
kind of idea.
Yeah.
And I stole this from Jace, but like the best way I ever heard it explained, like what our role is if we're going to do it, I think is to reach out our hand, like you got heaven and you got earth, and where they overlap is Eden, and they used to overlap, but they don't anymore. And one day you'll see heaven come to earth in Revelation. It's our job now to reach out, grab a hold of this, and pull them closer together as much as possible until at some point they'll get there. And that's, I think, a large part of our call as Christians, is to take that gospel. That's part of what it means to take the gospel to the world. It's also sharing the reason why we do it, and sharing the stories and doing all those things. So yeah, I mean, I think it's both. I think it's both. What do you think?
I think it's both. He's teaching about the kingdom which is there now, and he is a Messiah come, and for the kingdom period now then.
Well, we know that shortly after Christ's crucifixion, he talks about the temple being torn down. And of course, that could be either the fact that he is the temple or the temple in Israel. Eventually, Rome is conquered, but there's usually somebody that comes along behind. And again, maybe that goes back to what Travis was saying, in that, again, we're in the in between, in the not yet complete kingdom on earth. I see that, or I hear that a lot especially within the Christian church, as it relates to Christians, or as it relates to even people, and obviously, people hearing this message at the time were not Christians; they were Jews. They were, but he was telling them a new day was coming. I just don't know if it's within. There will be poor. He tells us that as well in the Bible. A lot of the things and there will be death for humans until he comes back, and the new kingdom that is completed. So, and bringing it up to today's time, I think with the difficulties that we see in the world today, especially in parts of the world, even outside of the U.S., there's still a lot of many of these things: mourning, poor in spirit, um, people that are beaten down, um, people that are marginalized. And I'm not sure that we will necessarily see the righteousness that many of us, I think, hope for until
Jesus.
No, I mean, I
Jesus
don't
comes
think
in.
we'll get there until we're there, right?
Right. Yeah.
I don't mean to say that.
Mm.
I think it's just we're called to do what we can. And I think this kind of comes out of
Mhm.
like we saw the just what was it, the one before this one or a couple up about mourning.
Mhm.
And we're mourning because of the brokenness of the world. And now we are told to thirst for righteousness. Not just don't just mourn, thirst for righteousness.
Yeah.
Um,
I think we can have hope, knowing that, especially we're, in our time, we can have hope because we know the end of the story. At this
mhm,
point in time, obviously, they didn't. He had not been crucified yet. He had not been, rose from the dead. And yeah, I think he was foretelling that in some of this, obviously.
mhm.
And
Righteousness could be referring to alignment with God's way of thinking as we become the holy priesthood that he desired even back in the Mosaic law. In Exodus 19,
mm,
he says that we should be a holy priesthood. What does a priesthood do is it connects people with God through his word or the scripture, and brings them along, similar to what we now call the Great Commission, in sharing that goal for mankind as God sees it. And that also means we don't just sit around and be holy and wait for it, uh, because God's way of distributing his message is to go do it. Put his love and commands in our mind and heart, and then we used to, in Texas, we used to say, put feet on your prayers.
mm,
Mhm. Yeah. Well, that kind of takes us into the next one, right? The blessed, the good life belongs to the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Mercy is central to Jesus's entire ministry, right? Exemplified in the parables like the Good Samaritan, all over the place. Healing, taking anytime he's taking the good news, he's taking a whole lot of mercy with him. It's one of abundance without end. Um, and so, yeah, showing mercy reflects God's nature, brings us closer to his heart. Even when it seems odd, God rewards abundant giving. In Luke 16, there's the parable of the shrewd manager, where
mhm.
he's being a bad manager of his boss's money, right? When he's about
Yeah.
to get fired, he's called in the boss's debtors and had them lower their debts. The manager finds out, but then he praises the guy for acting shrewdly. Um, you know, the story of the Bible is a story of God's loving mercy for his people again and again, no matter what. We see mankind messes it up in the beginning, and God says, "That's all right. We'll try again. Let's go to Cain and Abel." Crap, that one didn't work out either. Let's just go to the next one. That didn't work out either. Let's wipe the whole thing out, but let's save Noah. And then, that weird thing happened in the tent right after the ark. And let's try again, and so on and so on and so forth. Story after story, right? On that thing that we call the Old Testament. Um, so it's nothing but mercy. I mean, from a big picture point of view, I mean, there's definitely some pointed things along the way, but the overarching theme is just forgiveness again and again. until finally God's like, you know what? I think they're going to mess this up. So you know what I'm going to do? So I'm going to go down and take care of it for them. So, um, and that's the great news. Good news. So, but yeah, I mean, this is the first one. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. There's a number of these different little things throughout the Sermon on the Mount where you see Jesus kind of almost implying, like, hey, you need to do this to get that. Like, do mercy so you get mercy. And he doesn't come right out and say it, but there's, you know, in the Lord's Prayer, it talks about forgive us our debts as we
Mhm.
forgive those who, like we get forgiven because we're forgiving. Which is an interesting little twist that Jesus puts in there about, I think, like you said, we can't just sit back and be holy. Like we're called, like, yeah, we get, but we're supposed to give too.
The first time I read Matthew, I reread and reread and reread, and every time I read the first Beatitudes, there is literature after that we actually speak towards it. Um, and and it appears that Jesus is telling us it's not a physical thing, it's a spiritual thing we're all dealing with. Everyone has it. Everyone's running into this. Whether you're rich with money, but you're still poor in spirit. Um, and it's not a to give money to other people. I mean, not saying, not, don't get me wrong, not saying don't do that. We do that, but it's not based off of that though. It's just to show your love through spirit. It's how to build each other up with having no money. I have friends of mine. Well, I had a friend of mine who was poor, but he didn't need money. He needed conversation. He needed love. He needed to hear things. He needed to talk to. That's where he helped to build him up. Um, and every time I'm going through this, I'm going. I think the last one we covered, which um, was it the merciful?
Yes.
Um, it's to be merciful, you have to be mercy. You have to know what it is, the feeling of it. If you've never had it before, there's no way you can actually give it to anyone else. You can't really show it.
Well,
It's you have to receive it in order to do it. And I think that's
mhm.
the other thing. You have to accept Jesus' love first. If we don't, we're missing missing the mark. We're jumping forward. I'm learning things quickly, and I want to tell them these things, but it's not really happening because I don't haven't been felt it yet. Does it make what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Jesus is he's the mark. He is the line, and we're trying to reach to. We can't reach it, but he's always there. He's explaining it to us. It's about our hearts and our minds have to be focused on him, embodied in him, and then we use what he gave to us, we give to other people.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if that's why some churches, I feel like get carried away at like breaking people down at like how sinful we are. And I think they do it for good reason. Two, principally. One, to scare people away from hell to go to heaven. But then also, I think what you're getting at, Kyle, where um, it's almost like a boot camp where like you need to know you're down here to realize how good you have it. So then take that message to other people. But can be done in some very damaging ways along the way. Like, it's got to be careful how it's done. Um, I mean, more often than not, it's not done in a great way, I don't think, over the last, little while. But yeah, yeah. But yeah, I mean, it what you were saying about like really understanding about like the purity of heart and stuff. Like so like that kind of leads us into the next one too, where blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. So Jesus is turning back inside. And I imagine at this point in this in the sermon, if you're sitting in the crowd, like somebody's out in the crowd and they're like, come on, man. Like all like the rest of them were like, okay, but now like the pure in heart, acting rightly towards each other, that's not enough. Like, you can be merciful, you can do the other, but is your outward behavior, matched by a pure internal heart? Um, so that one's going to be a hard one. If they're not saying it out loud, maybe somebody's saying it under their breath from the crowd. So purity of heart involves sincerity and focus on God's presence. This is that seek internal holiness. Make sure you're aligned with God and integrity, and that you're not just doing things for show or to check boxes. And this is another callback, kind of how Jesus was pulling a quote from Psalms for the meek or powerless one. This one here pulls from Psalm 24, verses 3 and 4, where the psalmist declares, "Who shall ascend the hill of the Lord? He who has clean hands and a pure heart." So to be with God requires purity. So he's saying you get to see God. If you weren't thinking of it earlier, you might be finding yourself wondering, does Jesus actually expect us to live out the call, or is this a strive towards it? Is that good enough sort of thing? I think while it's a big call, the narrative of the Bible seems to lead to a real call here. Brokenness is a theme, and it's been a heavily focused one for Protestants. But the Bible starts at Eden. It doesn't start in the fall. Mankind and God dwelling together.
Right.
And it tells a story that leads us back there in Revelations. So I don't think we don't just get to sit here and wait and expect to wake up one day there. That's the whole discipleship process. And I think that's why it says, go and make disciples, not go and save souls. Sanctification doesn't happen overnight. And yeah, you need to be striving towards it. Don't expect it overnight, but that's the goal, and like there's real life examples that I found, like Nelson Mandela. The man spent 27 years in a prison cell, right? Um, and despite the harsh conditions and the injustice that he faced for that, he came out and preached reconciliation rather than revenge, and he did it from a Christian perspective. One of the most remarkable acts of forgiveness came when he actually invited his former jailer to his presidential inauguration in 1994. So, his ability to forgive those who had wronged him became a cornerstone of a country's peaceful transition. There's different stories that we see here. One from 2006, where a gunman went into an Amish schoolhouse in Nickel Mines, Pennsylvania, killing 5 young girls and injuring several others before he took his own life. And in the aftermath, the Amish community responded with immediate forgiveness. They reached out to the shooter's family with compassion and support. They attended his funeral and even offered financial assistance to the family. And it got worldwide attention for principles of forgiveness. So yeah, it's not easy, but it's been done. And it's been done not just by Jesus.
We're here because somebody did it previously to our lives.
So I'm going to keep going. So the good life belongs to the peacemakers, or blessed are the peacemakers. In case you missed it at the beginning, I've been using good life as an alternate translation to blessed. For they shall be called sons of God. The biggest cultural thing here is there's lots of different ways to make peace at Jesus' time. There's lots of different ways to make peace today. But the context here, at Jesus' time, there were 4 main groups of people in this crowd, probably. There's the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the Zealots, and the Essenes. The Sadducees, they were the ruling class. They made peace with Rome to carve out a relative wealth and stability for themselves. The Pharisees were a mix of a pastor and a seminary professor. Some were more academic, but some really tried to get out with the people. They valued strict observance of the law, made the peace. The Zealots were from a group that within 3 generations of when Jesus is teaching had attacked and kicked out the Romans and purified the temple. They see peace on the other side of conflict. And then the Essenes, they're the group out in Qumran with the Dead Sea Scrolls. They were separatists to a certain degree. They felt that the rest of the society had been compromised. So we're going to go over here to find peace away from y'all. All of them might hear this call to be a peacemaker and be like, yep, that's what I'm doing. We might all do that too, by our own definitions, right? From a biblical context, Jesus would have likely been thinking about the concept of shalom, I think. Yeah, peace in the Bible on both sides of the Testament line, Old and New. It's not just an absence of violence, but a presence of justice and harmony amongst all God's people. And I think shalom really does the best at encompassing that. And if we're going to have justice and harmony amongst all God's people, then we got to ask the question, who are God's people? And I think the answer is pretty simple. Everyone. Yeah, every chromosomal combination of humanity, every people group, even those, evil Republicans or those commie Democrats or those libertarians or the Greens or the whoever the heck, whoever those people are you don't like, them too. Jesus is going to double down on this, a few more lines about even including our enemies. God's peace includes justice for all of them. So the violence of the Zealots is probably missing the mark. The Sadducees' political realism at the expense of others is going to miss the mark. The Pharisees' focus on law and then disregard for the people also misses the mark. And while the Essenes might be doing great things over there, you can't have peace with people if you're ditching them and going over there. So working to make peace is a hard task for sure.
What is the peace
for God to do it, he had to come to earth and become one of us and let us kill him.
What is the peace that passes understanding? What is that?
Yeah. So
That
you say,
really
what is
doesn't-
the peace that passes?
Yeah. Peace that passes understanding, that we are given.
Yeah.
What is it?
What is that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. When I hear that, I think more of like that's like the comfort.
It's not necessarily the absence of violence or war or sinfulness or whatever.
Yeah.
In most people's lives are how you would define it. How would you define
Well, I
it?
think it's that future hope, right? That one day all things will be made right.
Yeah.
We have comfort, peace, and knowing that one day it's all going to be made right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all going to be made right.
Ultimately, trust.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little bit of a controversial understanding of God's people, though. They're all God's people in the sense that he created them, but if they don't turn to him away from sin, they will not make it. So you have some groups that believe in a thing called universalism, which is that everybody's going to heaven, and that's not biblical, in my opinion. So there's two senses of of what God's people means, depending on the context.
Sure. Well, I guess there's God. It depends on what point you're standing at, right? So there's God's people are everybody, but then the question is that same everybody who gets to join in the new heaven and new earth, and that may or may not be a different set of people. There's hints at universalism, there's hints at other, but like there
Mhm.
definitely seems to be a strong track for there's a remnant that's preserved, not a whole that's preserved. But yeah, there's verses all over the place on that one. So, but I think that the general consensus among most and definitely the conservative um, is that it's not everyone. So.
What Jesus says it's a narrow road. Even, you think you're on the right road, but it's not. It's more narrow. Sometimes I think we're comfortable where we are, and we're not really. It's like I, my faith isn't my belief. My belief is when I started. That's my belief. My faith gets me going forward. My faith shows what I believe in, what I believed in. And I think that's where uh, the question of if if you believe that everyone goes to heaven, but it's because they think we are, doesn't mean that's truthful. Just an act. That's just a word. My belief through Christ, He is the key. Therefore, and I focus at Jesus, not not anything else. And then my faith helps other people around me because of my belief in Christ. I believe, and that's a thought for me. I believe I'm on a narrow road, and it's a hard road to be on. It's very hard because a lot of times I forget. Sometimes I wake up and I'm going the wrong way and I forgot for a week or so, or a day or so, or an hour ago. Who knows? But it's definitely it requires effort through Christ.
Well, and beyond going to heaven is being a part of the New Jerusalem.
Yeah.
The
Some
heaven,
consider the
heaven
new
and
Eden.
earth
Hmm.
and the New Jerusalem.
And then we get a little transition into how do you know maybe if you're on this right road, right? Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
Mm.
Yeah. I feel like this is kind of an extension of the peacemaking, right? Not only is peacemaking not easy, he's telling us people aren't going to like it. There's going to be opposition.
There's a cost, typically.
Yeah. Resistance against living the good life shouldn't be seen as a sign of failure, though. This beatitude is encouraging steadfastness and perseverance despite these trials. And those who endure the persecution for righteousness' sake are fortunate, for they get the kingdom of heaven. And again, this is like doubled down on that those who revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely. This final beatitude personalizes the message. This is the very first time, if you missed it, if you look back, this is the first time Jesus says you instead of those. The other ones were those. This one is you. Um, you know, but again, I think we shouldn't necessarily take this out of context either and be like, oh, well, people don't like me because I'm preaching the word, right? Like, I think you can see people, like I think like the Westboro Baptist Church, right? Or I think of an example. I remember being at Disneyland a couple years ago, and they were having some sort of event for LGBT something. I don't know what it was. We're on our way out because we had finished the day there, and all sorts of different people in different costumes are on their way in for this event. And right at the crossroads is somebody maybe with good intentions, maybe with just a lot of baggage and need to go see a therapist, holding a sign telling people that they're all going to hell, and the guy started getting made fun of a little bit, and so I'm being persecuted for my faith. No, you're being persecuted because you're being a jerk. Like there's a different way to do that, maybe. You know, because you got to put these in the context of the rest of the Beatitudes, right? Is that gentleness? Is that meekness? Is that showing love? Is that being a peacemaker? Or is it just giving people a hard time? Like, you don't know any of these people. You have nothing to do, and you're just going to stand there on a street corner and yell at them. Like, and I mean, some of you may disagree with me on that, but that's just my 2 cents on a, you know, personal experience I had. But yeah. So,
Yes.
and that's it for the Beatitudes, but that's only about 10% of the Sermon on the Mount. So still got a ways to go. But yeah, any other thoughts on the Beatitudes?
I like what you just said. I agree to that. Um, you are you is it your desire to save them, to love them, or to hate them? If I want to hate them, then I would do that. I would say that. But otherwise, I won't. I want to hate them. I want to love them. How can I love them?
Right.
By showing compassion, love, understanding, mercy. Because God has control, not me. He judges them, not me. I have
Right.
no control doing that, nor do I want to.
Yeah.
So I like what you
But
said.
I bit my tongue and kept going. And it wasn't until I don't think I got back. It wasn't until like later that night or back, maybe further down the road at the soonest. I don't, but I think it was after. I wish I had stopped and stayed, like, and not confronted those people, but been like, "Hey, no, I'm here to let you know Jesus actually does love you." Like they're over there doing whatever. Um, but like I came up with a thought process, but it took me way too long, and I wish I'd been able to think of it more and act on it in the moment. But yeah, so
You know, and I would say this. Uh, that conversation we had, well, got himself in the hot mess, and no one stood up with him, for him, encouraged him, or any said anything good towards him. And for myself, I felt broken because I didn't say anything to him when it was all said and done. Um,
mm,
my thought process was like it shocked me. It truly shocked me.
right.
And but more I thought about it, going, I should have said something like there's love for him, period.
Mhm.
So it's amazing that we can talk about anyone else who we call as a anyone who's out of the pocket, who could be going the wrong way, um, wrong thoughts, wrong attitude, whatever. Um, but we should always have a good heart for anyone. And I think that's where we're thinking that Christians we're good people, so we shouldn't say we acknowledge they won't say anything wrong. And when it happens, we're caught off guard. And I think a lot of times we need to step up and love the people, not necessarily argue with the people who are arguing already, but just love the people who are being persecuted and show love
Right.
from Christ.
Yeah. Just stand with those who are being persecuted. Like, yeah, yeah, go and be with them. Because yeah, like it wouldn't be stand, turn around and yell at the people who are yelling. No, no, like because that's not right either. It's
Right.
go and be with like because I mean, I'm sure if I had stood there, there would have been people who were getting visibly upset. There would have been people that weren't. There would have been people screaming back, and be there for those people. So
Love your enemies, though. What about turning around for those who are doing the persecution?
mhm. Yeah,
And they need love too, and they do. Yeah, you're right. Because sometimes we forget about the ones who's throwing the punch versus the one who gets hit.
hmm
And what's behind all that with them? individually.
There's something behind it. There's something behind it.
It's hard to stay on this road, huh?
What's that?
It's hard to stay on this road.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, well, even the disciple, I mean, well, the one that took the sword and cut off the ear of the
Peter?
Roman centurion, and Jesus put the ear back on because, you know.
Yeah.
Man.
So yeah. Well, then we get a couple of analogies here. Salt and light. Stay salty, friends. Don't let your salt become useless. This is dirt, right? Um, salt back then was even more important than it is now. Think of your refrigerator if you're thinking about salt in ancient times, right? Or your air conditioner. If you're in the South, it's a source of life. Preserves life. The same thing with light. I can't imagine. It would have been so cool to like live. I don't know if you've ever been anywhere where like they don't have a lot of electricity, or if you're out camping somewhere and just like how dark it is, how much we take electricity for granted. Lights all over the place.
I lived
Yeah.
I lived without electricity until I was over 3 years old.
So
And I
Yeah.
do remember, I even remember,
so having a light on a stand in the house, like, let that light shine. So,
how did you keep your milk cool?
put it in the basement, in the cellar.
No, you would put it in the spring branch, which came out of the hillside, a mountainside at 50 degrees.
Yes, yep.
And
Put
if
it in
it's soured, you made buttermilk and butter out of it.
Yeah, there you go. So,
I always thought that we are the light. We're the reflection of the light. Like Jesus is the light.
Yeah.
We reflect him through us to the world. Because we have no power we'll burn ourselves out. We need something to fuel us. And it's where I see it more the fact that if I'm embodied in Christ, I get my power through Christ. Therefore, I'm showing Christ's love and his light.
I
yeah,
like
like
the way you put that.
kind of like how like the moon's lit up in the sky, but it doesn't actually have any light. It's just the sun's reflection. Is the modern day analogy. Yeah. On this one, what gets me about the light one is, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. That's in verse 15. But then down in, what is it, 6? In 6:5, when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray in the synagogues on the street corners to be seen by others. So wait. You told me to put my light out there, and now you're telling me to go hide. Which one is it? I don't know. But I mean, it's for a point, right? Like, what's that heart? What's that heart? Well, back to the purity of heart. Why are you doing it? Why are you doing it?
One is to show love. One is to showing your
Sure.
butt in a neighborhood. Staying on a
Pride.
hill. It's-
Yeah. But like you said, it's not easy. It's a fine line to walk. Like, am I doing it for the right reason or am I not? I think you always kind of got to be like reevaluating yourself.
Who are you shining the light for?
Mhm.
Yep. But
Yeah.
that's the point. I think that's the point. We're so focused at Jesus more than ourselves. If we do that, we make less mistakes.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
to slow us down now.
So, yeah. Before I keep jumping through, all right, let me do the fulfillment of the law, right? So actually, before I do that, so one thing to keep in mind if you don't know this already is Jace has talked about these things called chiasms before. If you don't know what a chiasm is, it's spelled with I think a K. I'm not exactly sure. I'll have to look it up.
CH.
Yeah, but I think it's Kai, chiasm or something like that. The but anyway, the idea is if you think of like a greater than or less than symbol from your math class, like the little sideways V, it's a structure. Or if you think of it like a mountain, if it's this way, you can do that. It's a parallel literary structure and device, and so this is written in a chiasm, the entire thing. If you look at the verse in the beginning, verse on the end, they're very similar. And then you move up a verse, they mirror each other. And right in the middle is the Lord's Prayer. The Lord's Prayer is the middle of the Sermon on the Mount. And that means it's at the top of the mountain, if we use the mountain one, or it's the important point that the author's trying to make with their literary device. Um, which I think tells us like how important prayer is, that Jesus put it right there, or Matthew put it there, everything comes out of prayer. And then even within the prayer, the middle of the prayer is reliance on the Father, I believe. 5, 6, 7, 8. Our Father, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done. Yeah. So in the Lord's Prayer, I would strongly encourage you just to like read it daily for like the next week. There's a lot packed into the Lord's Prayer. Um, you know, I mean, our Father. Again, we get an R, and so we're like getting invited in. And you'd be like, well, it's Jesus, so it's his dad, right? No, I don't think that's what I mean. This was a big deal back then. Like we're used to this now as Christians, but like you said, like this is a Jewish audience. They'd be like, no, like we don't say God's name, right? Like you're not supposed to do that sort of stuff. Um, and so now to like just call him Father, okay. Um, Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Um, there's a lot packed in. But so when you look at the chiasm, there's basically Jesus is setting up, I think, this idea of like a greater righteousness. And that's what we're getting called into, is a kingdom of greater righteousness. And that's kind of what leads into this fulfillment of the law. So don't think I've come to abolish the law. I've not come to abolish it. Uh, you know, Basically every jot and tittle matters, which is the little thing like cross your T's and dot your I's would be the English equivalent. So unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. And people are like, mind's blown, because the Pharisees are the ones that care more than anybody else, right? But again, I think it gets at this heart issue thing, and it's a greater righteousness. It's about the deeper magic, to quote C.S. Lewis, right? And then we're given like real concrete examples of, you've heard it was said a long time ago, don't murder. That's not good enough. What's behind the murder? It's anger. And it's basic, simple anger. And like we see in the murder section, with like decreasing anger, there's actually increasing penalty on God's side, which is a weird, fun dichotomy. You see, um, yeah, so if you're angry with your brother or sister, and you say, if anyone says you fool, you're in danger of the fire of hell. Or no, hold on, excuse me, I skipped ahead. If you're angry with a brother or sister, you're subject to judgment. Anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court, like a local judge. And anyone who says, you fool, to just anybody, is in danger of the fire of hell, or Gehenna. So I'm just mad at my brother, and I might be judged, but like just kind of informal judgment. I call my brother or sister a name, Now I'm like in trouble with the court. And then anybody, I'm like, hey, you fool. Now I'm going to hell. It's this like reverse thing, um, which Jesus is doing there. And yeah, settle matters quickly. Again, to the peacemaking. Then we see adultery, and that it's about lust, right? Not just about, uh, adultery, divorce, and the importance of the sanctity of marriage. One thing about that is that one gets, I think, inappropriately interpreted to get people to stay in abusive relationships. I don't think that's what Jesus is saying. I think if you were to ask Jesus, Jesus, you said that I can only get divorced for sexual immorality. My husband has been faithful to me sexually, but he beats me nightly. Can I get a divorce? I think Jesus would say, child, you should probably not stay in that relationship. That, marriage is meant for good as a reflection of God's covenant with man. And that's not, that's not what I was saying. I was making a point about the sanctity of marriage and God's covenant. I wasn't, we got to be careful with that. We got to be careful with that. And then, yeah, all these different examples of like what it is that's behind it and like the idea of like a greater righteousness. And then we get practical guidance on how to live it out, give to the needy, pray. I'm going through this real fast because we just got a couple minutes left. Treasures in heaven, um, fasting. Is there any part of this you guys want to go over in particular?
I can spend hours talking about this, but
Anybody?
I it's it's about the conversation he's speaking to the his disciples, and he's speaking to the the Pharisees who are listening. And when he says, "But I say," so he's like, "I'm telling you what it is, not what you heard, what you were taught from other people." And I see that it I'm pretty sure it shocked some people. Some people were very frustrated, very mad. Others were like, had no idea he can actually say this. Um, and it's each one, when he's speaking, he is, it appears that he is doing little bit of a turn into every Pharisee who's in charge, a little bit at a time. And you don't really notice that sometimes. I had to read it a few times to really see it. And I don't know why, but not I know why, but it is more the fact that he is trying to show that it's about the heart of man, not about the mind. It's not about the law. It's not about what you thought it was. It's what it is. It's about your inside of you. What's driving it? Regardless of the topic, each one is the same thing each time.
Yeah. Tom, you started saying something, but I think you were
Oh,
muted.
I was muted. uh, the thing is, what we do or say has a result on the lost or even the saved in what they do. So everything should be to the glory of God and His message. So for example, if somebody's out blatantly sinning, yelling at them that they're going to hell is not going to accomplish anything but hate. Um, we should tell the truth about what is good and bad in God's eyes, but we should love the people and hate the sin just like God does.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we see that in, the don't judge. Don't look at this. You criticize the speck in your brother's eye. Meanwhile, you got a plank in your own eye. And then, like Fran, you were saying, like there's some reason why those people decided to go out there and yell. That then there was a plank in their eye on something, and maybe it's not something in their life that they did wrong. Maybe it's just a deep hurt. But I feel like there's so much to that analogy that Jesus gives about the take care of the plank in your own eye. 'Cause, like doing the self work is so much harder. Um, I think we as humans have a tendency to like there it seems like we feel like there's two default settings, right? Either I can um look at my own self and evaluate what's going on internally to try and address my issues, or I can make fun of somebody else to make myself feel better. Uh, and that's the default setting for a lot of people because it's easier. Um, and it's easier for a lot of reasons. I mean, our society doesn't really penalize it. If anything, for social media, it almost rewards it, right? You get likes for it. Uh, the but the real thing, it's harder to do the other one from like a psychological point of view to actually address your own shortcomings and your role in things and look at, you know, so yeah, and a lot of times there's not an easy solution for that either. Like those people who are out there, maybe it's nothing that they did wrong. Maybe it's they had an abusive father who was gay, or and now they want to go scream at gay people because it makes them feel better because their dad did something. Like who knows, right? But that doesn't solve the problem. No, it doesn't. It's definitely not showing God's love. That's for sure.
Well, I think Jesus, too, and all of these things and all of his teachings was looking underneath that that law that had been written, like do not murder. Okay, murder can be take a life, kill him, or it can be destroy his. With gossip you destroy reputation, or I mean, murder can happen in many different ways other than killing. And I think Jesus really was looking um, at the law and his Bible, the Bible that he used. We don't call it Bible, but um, and in a way to help people see that what was really involved in how we interact and how God loves us and how we should love him and each other. Just don't kill somebody is, like you were saying, maybe that wouldn't be very easy for me, but it may be easy for somebody. But I may be killing them even worse by something else, some other way that I uh, act to make their life um, not alive, or to wipe them out as a person. So I think many of these things have that kind of thing going on that Jesus wants us to look at it, And as you were saying, and as Thomas said, in the heart.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the most obvious example is like the oaths that's in there. And if you don't know about like the context for the oath, there was a whole game plan system for oaths at the time of the Israelites that he's speaking to, where you couldn't swear by God because of the respect for Yahweh, right? And God's name. Uh, so you swore by the temple instead. Uh, and you swore by the throne in the temple or the wings of the whatever, like all sorts of things, right? But since you weren't swearing by God, then that also meant, well, I didn't swear by God, so I can get out of it. And just ridiculous nonsense like that.
That's where we got lawyers from.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, yeah. So So yeah, it's not about games. It's about loving everybody the way God loves us and for the right reasons. Yeah. So yeah. Yeah. What are you any we got like 8 minutes. Any thoughts on God and money? That one's in here too. We got God and money, we got the golden rule, can't serve two masters. You'll hate money, hate God. But I mean, you can use money for God's kingdom. There's a balance, right? Um, any thoughts on either of those? I'm just trying to hit the highlight reel here and
Well,
point out
it's the
ones that
love
people
of
may have
money.
things to say about.
It's the love of money that's bad because you're placing money above God.
And
Money
what
can be a
and
great
how do you do that? What actions would you have if you're placing money above God?
doing things that get you money and are against God's teachings. Cheating, for example.
I mean, obvious ones are like complete exploitation, right? Or some degree of exploitation. Uh, I own rental property. I charge $2,000 a month for a rent of a downtown, partially furnished apartment in Warsaw, with utilities included. People are like, you could charge more money for that. You're probably right. I probably could, but like, I feel like that's enough. Um, so, and there are other people that like just gouge the hell out of people. We got slumlords in town that are charging $400 a week for things that are horrible. Um, but you know, so I mean, I think it's easy to look on the extremes, but then the question is always, what do I do in this particular situation? And I think that's where it's important to have community and to talk through it with people. And you know, if you're asking those questions, you're probably doing okay. If you're not asking those questions, then maybe you should be asking those questions. Because I mean, you should at least be thinking about it, I
What
think.
am I doing with my money that is loving God and others
Hmm.
instead of, you know, shoring up for myself?
Hmm. So, yeah. Yeah.
Not that shoring up for myself is bad always, but
Yeah.
could be.
Another one, real quick, for some context that maybe y'all already know, and if so, sorry. But if not, sometimes it gets different interpretations. So the turn the other cheek, the walk the extra mile, uh, we're called to be pushovers, right? Just get slapped twice. We're called to, do all like the context of that. Most people agree. If you're gonna get slapped on the right cheek, then you're getting it's an honor shame thing. You're getting a backhanded slap because you're below. When you turn the cheek, now they have to confront you as an equal. So it's actually a way to confront the person without confronting the person in a violent way. Like you're calling them out for what they're doing and how you're responding
Hmm.
in a very clever way. Uh, the walk the extra mile, Roman soldiers were allowed to make you carry their stuff, but they became very abusive in that practice. So they made rules that they couldn't make you walk more than a mile. If you agreed to walk more than a mile, the Roman soldier might now be getting in trouble with his commander because you're walking more than a mile. Go the extra mile puts the soldier in a weird spot. It's calling him out for what he's doing to you. Like, hey, you're still abusing me, even though they put a regulation on it. And now I just went the extra mile, and you might have a problem with your centurion. because you had me go farther.
Mm.
And then the cloak and the tunic, you are going to be now naked if you take off, you know, back to the poverty thing. Like these people owned two pieces of clothes, generally, their cloak and their tunic, and they didn't usually have extra sets. And there's a rule actually in the Old Testament about if you take a person's coat, you got to give it back to them because you can't let them be cold because that's not justice and righteousness. Like God's law says, no, you can take it, but then you got to give it back because it's going to get cold out. So if a person's actually going to do that and take it, then you're like, okay, fine, you can have it. And now here's my shirt. And now you've exposed your nakedness with them in public, which puts them in the awkward position of being called out for what they're doing and makes them, you know, in a spot. So all of those are very clever ways that Jesus crafted to confront the injustice without responding in kind. It's about don't respond in kind. Don't respond to their injustice with more injustice. But you should still try and, if you're able, expose them for what they're doing. So don't be a pushover. But like you said, it's super hard. But I'm not, modern day examples. I think of like, you know, nonviolent resistance, like Dr. Martin Luther King and other stuff like that, Gandhi. You know, but
I've thought of
civil.
that as an issue of forgiveness too at times. If somebody steals your coat or whatever, you're gonna condemn them, punish them, put them out of your life, and say they're worthless forever, or are you going to interact with them and say, well, you know, I see you're cold. Maybe, you know, I could loan you my cloak too.
I don't think forgiveness requires us to be. Forgiveness is like a heart posture. Like you can forgive somebody and still have boundaries.
Yes.
And I think we see that with Jesus, even when he talks about, you know, like he forgives all of us, right? But he left the town where they tried to kill him. You know, when he was in Galilee and the mob formed and he got out of town and he didn't go back. Um, it's okay to be smart about things. So we shouldn't be. But I often wonder what it would be like if I could ask Jesus one question. It would be, what do you do with the psychopaths, Jesus? Because I feel like none of the verses in the Bible are well, because like there are like psychopaths as a class, like they will take advantage and they will. I'm like, well, like what about the psychopath, Jesus? How do you respond to the psychopath? Like,
It's
because
easier.
like love doesn't work with a psychopath. It doesn't. Yeah, and that's where I mean, I think we still see there's boundaries. There's boundaries.
We could say, you know, he casts out the demons.
Yeah, and maybe that's the answer. It's like,
And
well, that
those
person needs
big
their demons
ran
cast
and
out.
jumped off the cliff.
So, no. All right. Well, we're 9:31. Anybody want the last word?
Thanks.
Thank
No.
you for teaching.
Thank you, Travis.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming.
Appreciate it.
April
I was
Fools,
a
I'm not
little, I was
Jace.
a little late getting on. I didn't realize we'd already talked about Upside Down Kingdom.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
no, you're fine. I'm gonna turn the recording off.
Okay.
Oh, if I can.